So I spoke earlier, I mentioned post-traumatic slave syndrome, and Dr. Joy DeGruy actually coined this term, and she has a book about it. I am actually going to read this as well because I want you all to be very clear on what PTSS is. So it is a theory that explains the etiology of many of the adaptive survival behaviors in African American communities throughout the United States and the diaspora. It is a condition that exists as a consequence of multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants resulting from centuries of chattel slavery, a form of slavery which is predicated on the belief that African Americans were inherently and genetically inferior to whites. This was then followed by institutionalized racism, which continues to perpetuate injury, right? So slavery, again, it really did a number, to say the least, it really did a number on our culture, on our race, right? To the degree that we have been oppressed so much that even sometimes we believe that we're inferior to whites, right? Or even other people. So a good example of this is when we meet other Black people, and Dr. DeGruy says, have you ever met a Black person that's not Black, right? And then she goes on to explain what that means. And essentially it's, when Black people want to highlight, they want to make salient all of their other, racial mixtures and backgrounds, right? So they're like, well, yeah, I'm Black, but let me tell you about my Portuguese history or my Portuguese genetics. Let me tell you about, the Italian part of my family. Let me tell you about the Native American part of my family, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with those other parts of people, but, people take these, ancestry tests and they get super excited because there's something other than Black. Newsflash, there's nothing wrong with being Black. Black is absolutely beautiful. Black is gorgeous. And Black, if it's who you are, it's just who you are, right? And other races are so proud of who they are. We are one of the only races who try to be absolutely everything else sometimes. There are many of us who know who we are and we're confident and we're comfortable with it, but some of us don't. And that is what post-traumatic slave syndrome is. And that's what that looks like. So, I say we are only as strong as we believe ourselves to be. And this is a picture of an elephant who is chained to a tree. And the significance of this picture is if you chain an elephant to a tree when they are, a newborn, a baby, they may not be stronger than the tree and they may not be able to get away, but because they are accustomed to being weaker than this tree for so long, once they grow and they're bigger and they're stronger and they could absolutely destroy the tree and the chain, they don't believe that they can. So they still stay there by the tree, right? And so this is sometimes what happens to us, that we have been held down and held back, and we've experienced so much racial trauma for so long that there are some of us who get to a place where we don't believe that we can make it. That we can be successful, that we can overcome racism, that we're wonderful just the way we are as Black people. So I have this question here on the slide because, and I want people to maybe give some feedback about, how they're feeling as it relates to racial trauma, what their experiences are. But I'm going to push this to the end, but I want people to be thinking about it because it is something that I would love to hear from other people once I finish going through the slides, and then we can just have an open dialogue. So how do we heal? How do we heal from racial trauma, right? So we always talk about therapy. Therapy is, absolutely wonderful. And I think, we have to be careful though. We have to be careful the type of therapist that we go to. And I don't necessarily mean racially. I mean that we have to make sure that we're talking to people who are culturally affirming people, that they validate our experiences. So you don't necessarily have to go to a Black therapist, even though we do get that request a lot at my practice from our Black clients who really want to talk to someone who looks like them. But one other thing I tell people about therapy is if you've never tried it before and you're seeking a therapist, interview your therapist, right? Because therapists have their own biases. We aren't perfect, and we also aren't all knowing. So we don't specialize in every area. So some people have never experienced racism, don't want to talk about it. It makes them feel uncomfortable. So if you've experienced racial trauma, those might not be the people that you want to talk to. So it's okay to say, hey, I'm interested in starting therapy. if you have, 15 minutes or a few minutes for me to talk to you and just do a brief consultation, I would love to do that before potentially starting or setting up an appointment for an initial intake. So it's just something for us to think about. Also, yoga, exercise, anything physical, that gets our heart rate up, also helps us to relax and to release some of that stress and that anxiety that we experience, is also helpful. One of my favorites is activism, right? So, I say that I'm an activist. I think, one of the most liberating and freeing experiences I've had is marching through the streets next to people who look like me and or allies and just shouting no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace. That might sound like something that's a small thing, a small activity to do, or that it may even be ineffective, but it really does help to just be able to scream, right? You're in the streets, you're marching, somebody has been killed that looks like you're walking by all of these policemen and you're almost like yelling at them in a sense. And so it just feels good. And then also we heal through education. So the more we know, the better we are in many situations, especially when it comes to knowing your rights and talking to police officers. We have laws that vary from state to state. So if you don't know your rights, your traffic stop rights and all of those things, then I encourage you to Google it, look it up for your state so that you can educate yourself. So I always like to, and I've done a similar presentation with Alicia McCullough, who you guys might know as one of the co-founders of Amplifying Black Voices, that movement. And this is kind of her area, but I find that people find these healing practices and types of healing practices to be very useful and very effective. So I do share them as well. So being able to walk away from gaslighting conversations is really important. There are some people that we are just never going to be able to convince that racism even exists, right? So we can't even get close to a conversation about reparations, for example. So you just have to walk away because some people just don't mean you well. But meditation also helps, mindfulness, again, yoga, music and humming and drumming, all of these things, these indigenous practices, these practices that our ancestors had, and used, those things can be extremely helpful. I have so many clients who say when they're stressed, they listen to music. Music is therapy to them, right? So these things can be very effective. And then also checking your body, doing a body scan. It's important that we are very aware of our bodies and we know when we feel changes, we feel differences, and we need to go and talk to someone, whether it's a therapist, your PCP. Start somewhere where you can go and talk to a professional about what you're feeling.